Hi everyone, it's Kathy, and I am back with my second card using the Crafty Friends stamp set from Paperie Ink. I started out by stamping the images onto a piece of Cougar Super Smooth cardstock with Catherine Pooler's Midnight ink. And I've been talking about the Catherine Pooler inks a little bit lately. I did want to mention that with the Catherine Pooler Midnight ink, it is an archival ink and it will also stain your stamps. I'm okay with my stamps being stained. To me, that says that my stamps have received all of the attention that they really deserve. But if having your stamps be stained bothers you, you might not want to use it. But I really like it. I get a really nice impression every time I've used it so far. It's been really crisp and really clear, really dark, and it's safe to use with Copics, and I really like to use Copics. And from what I understand, it's also waterproof, so you can use it for watercoloring as well. Anyway, back to the coloring here. For these little critters, I had a scrap. Well, it wasn't a scrap. I had a rectangle that was die cut previously before I started stamping, and I kind of made the mistake that I could use that rectangle and make it fit my card, which didn't turn out quite so well. So you'll see how I fixed that in the end. But let's get back to the coloring, because that's what I said, and then I went off on a tangent about my rectangle. So for the little monkey, I started out with my darkest color and added the shadows in where they would be, particularly around the sides of his face and at the top of his head, and then around his body. Then I came in with my mid-tone, and I'll have all of the Copic markers that I use listed down in the description below, and I'll also have a list of all the products that I used as well. So I continued just coloring this little monkey, and for the center of his face, I couldn't get those colors to blend quite the way I wanted them to, which is going to be a recurring theme in this video, and I'll explain why that happened as well. I did use the tip-to-tip technique just to get those colors to blend on the center of his face just a little bit better. For his little body, he's holding a pair of scissors and he has a piece of paper in front of his body. So there's just a tiny little bit of his tummy showing. So I did go in with just the very tip of my marker to color that in. When I started with the bunny, I started out with E43 and again added in the shadows where they would be the darkest. And I can't say that I'm going for a light source. I'm just concentrating more on more on where there would be shadows. So underneath his chin or where his hands would be casting a shadow, like on the bottom of his body or his feet. When I came in with the E43, I did leave a little bit of white space between the E43 and the actual stamped line, just so that I could come in with my lighter colors. So then I brought in my E42 and blended the E43 out just a little bit, but I did leave some pretty good white space right there in the center of his face as well as his belly, so that I could get a really nice highlight. Then I came in with my E41 and blended all of that together, and it wasn't blending. Again, this is going to be a recurring theme. So after I had the E41 in there, I brought the E42, well, no, I let it dry a little bit and colored in his ears with R20. And then I came back with the E42 and blended all of it together just to get rid of the real brightness from the center. Next, I moved on to the little pens and pencils and paintbrushes. And for his pencil, I did a red marker and used the same one for one of the markers in the little cup. And I wanted all of the little accessories in the little cup to be different colors since my little critters are such neutral colors. For the heart on the cup, I just used one color. I'm not going to try and shade it. It's very, very small. I did want the cup to be white, so I started with C3 and blended it out a little bit with C1 and then did a quick swipe with my colorless blender. For the piece of paper that the little monkey is holding, I decided to bring in just a little bit more green, and then I decided to stamp a little piece of paper in front of the bunny just so he could be coloring something or drawing something. I went around the edges of the paper with C3 and C1, just like I did for the mug, just to add in some shadows. I didn't want to color it in to become gray. I just wanted to add shadows so that it looked more white. Then I decided to add a little drawing on that little piece of paper, so I used the very tip of my marker and just did little dots in a circle so that they would appear to be flowers. Then I brought in my YG07, might have been a 5, but anyway, and I put the tip down, and then I kind of did a little bit of a bend in the tip just so that it would take on more of a leaf shape. And then I filled in the center of the flowers with a yellow marker. And then I decided that I needed to blend out the grays that I used on the sheet of paper, so I used my colorless blender and was really very careful not to get too close to the red markers because I didn't want that to bleed out everywhere. Then I decided that I needed to have a ground for these little critters to be sitting on, and I grabbed my BG10. And I started adding in the shadows, and then after I got them sort of where I wanted them to be, I brought in my BG000. And here comes that recurring theme again. They weren't blending very well. And it wasn't until after I was done with the card that I pulled out my scale and found that almost every marker that I used for this card needed to be refilled. My E42 marker, which is the one that I had used on the bunny, was down to, I think, 13.2 grams. And a full marker should be around 13.9 to 14.1 grams. And my BG10, being that it's a chow marker and not a sketch, a full chow marker should weigh 10.6 grams or 10.8 grams, somewhere around there. And it was all the way down to 9.8 grams. So it's no surprise that I couldn't get those colors to blend. Anyway, moving right along, after I finished the coloring, I could not get that rectangle to fit my card. So I pulled out my Cloudy Frames dies from Pink and Main and carefully positioned it so I could run it through my Gemini Junior. And then I used the same die to cut an orange frame as well. The patterned paper is something that I pulled from my stash. I do believe it's from Echo Park, and I don't think it's available anymore, but you can use any patterned paper that you have in your stash. I did cut a piece of orange paper to be 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, and then I adhered the other patterns on top of that just so that the stripes were over there on the right hand side and then those little swirly things on the left. And then to add a barrier or a separation to cover up that seam, I just trimmed off a real thin piece of green cardstock. And as you saw, liquid glue is not my friend. I picked it up and dropped it and got liquid glue all over my mat. So after I cleaned up that mess, I was, brave and used liquid glue again for the orange frame, adhered that to the front of the card, and then used my tape runner to adhere the little critters inside the orange frame. And the sentiment reads, "It's a good day to craft," and I stamped that off camera using the same Catherine Pooler Midnight ink onto a small scrap piece of cardstock, and just used my paper trimmer to trim that down, adhered that to a piece of orange cardstock that I had trimmed out to be slightly larger, tried to decide where I was going to put it on the card, and once I decided, I just put that into place. And that's it. That finishes up my card for today. Thank you so much for joining me. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you've not yet subscribed, I'd love it if you would. And don't forget to ring the bell so you're notified every time a new video is posted. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.